You ever have one of those moments where your entire world just stops? Where you're scrolling through your phone, minding your own business, and suddenly everything you thought you knew about your family just shatters. Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me. At the wedding party, I was cut from the guest list. I went on vacation. When the wedding fell apart, my whole family frantically tried to reach me. But let me back up, because you need to understand how I got here. I was sitting in the break room at work, halfway through a sandwich I wasn't even tasting, when my phone buzzed. My younger sister, Sophie. Finally, I'd been waiting weeks for the official invitation to her wedding. We'd been planning this thing together for months, trying on dresses until our feet hurt, arguing over flower arrangements, debating whether the chicken or the beef was better for the reception. This was our thing. Sisters doing sister stuff. Or so I thought. I opened the message and my stomach dropped. Hey Emma. Mom, and I need to talk to you about the wedding. Call when you can. That was it. No warmth. No excitement. Just clinical. Like I was a vendor she needed to cancel, not her sister. I stared at that message for a solid minute, my heart starting to pound in my chest. Something was wrong. Really wrong. I rang her immediately. Straight to voicemail. Rang Mom. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. The panic started creeping in, that horrible sinking feeling when you know something bad is coming but you can't quite see it yet. I tried the family group chat. Nothing. Radio silence. It was like they'd all coordinated to ghost me at the exact same time. 3 hours later, my phone finally rang. Mom. I practically lunged for it. Emma, sweetheart, we need to talk about the wedding. Her voice had that tone. You know the one, that careful, walking on eggshells tone people use when they're about to wreck you but want to pretend they're being reasonable about it. What's going on? I asked, my voice already shaking. There was a pause. A long one. The kind that tells you everything you need to know before a single word is spoken. Sophie's fiancé's family, they've raised some concerns. About you attending. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd I couldn't process it. What? What are you talking about? Do you remember that barbecue 2 years ago? When you had a bit too much wine and got into that argument with James's uncle? I barely remembered it. Some bloke going on about politics, me pushing back after a few drinks, voices getting raised. It lasted maybe 10 minutes before someone changed the subject. I'd apologized the next day. It was nothing. That was 2 years ago, Mum. I apologized. What does that have to do with? They don't feel comfortable with you there, Emma. And Sophie thinks it's best if we respect their wishes. The world tilted. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, this dull thudding sound that drowned out everything else. She's uninviting me? From her wedding. It's not personal, love. She just wants her day to go smoothly. Not personal. Mum, I'm her sister. But even as I said it, I could hear how hollow my words sounded. Because Sophie had already made her choice. She'd chosen them, these people who barely knew me, who'd held on to some drunken argument for 2 bloody years, over me. Her own flesh and blood. The family group chat exploded after that. Cousins, aunts, uncles. Everyone had an opinion. Some were outraged on my behalf. Others stayed suspiciously quiet. And Sophie, her only response, posted for everyone to see, was this. It's my day. I need to do what's best for MY marriage. If people can't respect that, maybe they shouldn't come either. I read that message about 50 times, each time feeling more humiliated, more disposable, more erased. I'd been cut from my own sister's wedding like I was toxic, like I was the problem. And the worst part, nobody was stopping it. The next few days were brutal. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except this constant replay loop in my head of every conversation with Sophie, every moment we'd shared, trying to figure out where I'd gone so catastrophically wrong that she'd throw me away like this. I'd find myself crying at the most random moments. In the shower, on the bus, in the middle of the cereal aisle at Tesco, just standing there with tears running down my face while some tinny speaker played a chipper pop song. People would give me these uncomfortable looks and hurry past. I didn't even care. Work was a nightmare. I'd zone out in meetings, staring at nothing, until someone would say my name 3 times and I'd snap back to reality with everyone staring at me. My boss pulled me aside, asked if everything was okay at home. I just nodded and mumbled something about a family thing. What was I supposed to say? Yeah, my sister's getting married, and I'm so worthless she's banned me from attending. My mates were incredible, though. Absolutely incredible. The moment they found out, my phone lit up like Christmas. Messages of support, voice notes calling Sophie every name under the sun, offers to key her car or slash her tires, which I appreciated even if I wasn't actually going to let them do it. It was my best mate Jess who finally said what I needed to hear. We were at the pub, me nursing a gin and tonic I hadn't touched, her watching me with that concerned look she gets. Sod them, she said suddenly. I looked up. What? Sod. Them. All of them. You know what you should do. Book a holiday. Right now. Go somewhere absolutely incredible. Somewhere you've always wanted to go. And you go there during the wedding. I started to shake my head. Jess, I can't just. Why not? What's keeping you here? A family that's treating you like rubbish. A sister who's made it crystal clear where you rank on her priority list. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. Emma, listen to me. You could sit here, in your flat, miserable, torturing yourself while they all celebrate. Or you could take that same money you would have spent on a gift and a new dress, and you could go live your best bloody life. Show them, show yourself, that you don't need their validation. At first, the idea seemed insane. Petty. Running away from the problem instead of facing it. But the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. Why should I stay home and wallow? Why should I make myself available for their guilt trips and last-minute "we're so sorry, please come" messages if they suddenly change their minds? I had savings. I had time off work I'd been hoarding for the wedding anyway. And I had absolutely nothing left to lose. So I did it. Right there in the pub, on my phone, I booked a trip to Greece. Found this gorgeous little Airbnb on a tiny island, whitewashed walls, blue shutters, a balcony overlooking the Aegean Sea. It cost more than I'd usually spend, but in that moment I didn't care. I needed this. I needed to prove to myself that I was worth more than how they were treating me. When I told Mum, she absolutely lost it. Emma, you can't be serious. You're going to miss your sister's wedding out of spite. I'm going to miss my sister's wedding because I wasn't invited, Mum. Don't be dramatic. You're making this so much harder than it needs to be. No, I interrupted, and my voice was steel. Sophie made this hard. She chose them over me. So now I'm choosing me over all of you. You're being selfish. Good. Maybe it's about time I was. I told them I'd be completely unreachable during the wedding. Phone off. No emails. No social media. I was going to be on a Greek island, sipping wine, watching the sunset, and not giving a single thought to the family that had decided I wasn't worth keeping around. The power shift was intoxicating. For the first time since this nightmare started, I wasn't reacting to their decisions. I was making my own. I was taking control. And honestly, it felt bloody amazing. Stepping off the ferry onto that Greek island felt like stepping into a different universe. The air smelled like salt and wild herbs. The sun was warm on my skin without being oppressive. The water was so blue it looked photoshopped. And everywhere I looked, there was just peace. My Airbnb was even better in person. The host, a lovely Greek woman named Maria, greeted me with homemade baklava and showed me around. The balcony overlooked the sea, with white cliffs dropping down to crystal clear water. The bedroom was simple but perfect. White linens, a ceiling fan, windows that opened to let in the ocean breeze. And the moment I put my suitcase down, I switched off my phone. Completely off. Not on silent, not on airplane mode, off. The world back home ceased to exist. The first proper night's sleep I'd had in weeks came that night. No nightmares about the wedding. No anxious spiraling about what I'd done wrong. Just the sound of waves and cicadas, and the deep, dreamless sleep of someone who'd been running on fumes for far too long. The days that followed were pure magic. I fell into this beautiful routine. Wake up with the sunrise, have coffee on the balcony, spend the morning exploring the island. I'd walk along the coastal paths, these narrow trails that wound between olive groves and cliffside chapels. I'd stop at tiny tavernas where the owners didn't speak much English but would bring me whatever they thought I should try. Grilled octopus, fresh tomatoes that tasted like sunshine, bread so good I'd eat half a loaf without realizing it. I met other travelers at my Airbnb. There was Anna from Sweden, who was recovering from a brutal divorce. Miguel from Portugal, who'd just quit his soul-crushing corporate job. Sarah from Australia, who'd walked away from her family business because they'd expected her to sacrifice everything for their definition of success. We'd sit on the shared terrace in the evenings, sharing stories, passing around wine, and I realized something profound. My story wasn't unique. Everyone here was healing from something. Everyone here had chosen themselves when others had tried to make them choose differently. One day, I went on a boat tour. We sailed to hidden coves and sea caves, and at one point, the guide announced we could jump off the cliff into the water if we wanted. It was maybe 15 feet. Not dangerous, but high enough to be scary. Old Emma would have stayed on the boat, would have watched everyone else do it, and made excuses about not being a strong swimmer or being afraid of heights. But I climbed up to the edge of that cliff, looked down at the turquoise water below, and I jumped. The freefall lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it felt like flying. When I hit the water, it was so cold it shocked the breath out of my lungs, and when I surfaced, I was laughing. Actually, properly laughing for the first time in weeks. That night, I sat on my balcony with a journal and wrote everything down. The betrayal, the hurt, the anger, but also the clarity. Because being away from it all, I could finally see the truth. This wasn't about me. This was about Sophie's inability to stand up for what was right. About a family that valued keeping the peace over protecting one of their own. About people who decided their comfort was more important than my worth. I'd been seeking validation from people who were never going to give it to me. And I was done. Back home, the wedding day arrived with all the promise of a beautiful disaster. Sophie woke up at 6 in the morning in the hotel suite she was sharing with her bridesmaids, her stomach already in knots. She'd barely slept, kept jolting awake with this horrible gnawing feeling that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. And every time she'd reach for her phone, half hoping for a message from me, some last-minute change of heart, some sign that I'd forgiven her, there was nothing. "Has anyone heard from Emma?" she asked for the 4th time that morning as her bridesmaids bustled around, doing hair and makeup. They exchanged uncomfortable glances. Nobody wanted to be the one to say it. "Soph, she's not coming," one of them finally said gently. "You knew that." But Sophie couldn't let it go. The guilt was eating her alive. She kept thinking about all the times I'd been there for her, when her first boyfriend cheated, when she failed her driving test 3 times, when she'd been too anxious to go to university alone, so I'd driven her there and helped her unpack. And she'd repaid all of that by throwing me away to please people who barely knew me. The ceremony itself went perfectly, at least on the surface. The church was beautiful, decorated with white roses and fairy lights. Sophie looked stunning in her dress. Her new husband, James, cried when he saw her walking down the aisle. Everything was picture perfect. But Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that something vital was missing. And when she looked out at the congregation, saw the empty seat where I should have been sitting, she felt physically sick. The reception was where everything properly fell apart. James's family had been drinking since before the ceremony, champagne at breakfast, wine during photos, and now they were into the spirits at the open bar. James's father was already loud and red-faced, his voice carrying across the venue as he told inappropriate jokes to anyone who'd listen. Sophie watched them with growing horror. These were the people she'd chosen over her own sister. These people. Then came the speeches. James's father stood up, swaying slightly, and launched into what can only be described as a car crash in slow motion. He made crude jokes about their wedding night. He told a rambling story about James's ex-girlfriend that made everyone deeply uncomfortable. He referenced Sophie's weight. Finally found a girl with enough meat on her bones. And she felt tears prick her eyes as nervous laughter rippled through the room. Half the guests looked mortified. The other half pretended to find it hilarious, because they didn't know what else to do. Sophie's mum was gripping her wine glass, so hard her knuckles had gone white. But the absolute peak of the disaster came 2 hours into the reception. The doors burst open, and a woman strode in, mid-20s, dressed to the nines, makeup perfect except for the mascara starting to run down her cheeks. James's ex-girlfriend. The one from the speech. "This is a mistake!" she screamed, and the entire reception hall went dead silent. "James, you know we're meant to be together. You know this is wrong." Security was already moving, but she was on a roll, Years of grievances pouring out in front of 200 stunned guests. She's not right for you. She'll never understand you like I do. We had something real, and you're throwing it away for what? For her. It took 3 security guards to remove her, her screams echoing even after the doors closed. The DJ tried to restart the music, but the damage was done. The fairy tale was shattered. Guests were whispering, some were filming on their phones, and Sophie was openly crying into her hands. James's family immediately went on the defensive, rowing amongst themselves about who told the ex where the wedding was. Voices rose. Someone threw a drink. A bridesmaid tried to calm Sophie down, but she was having a full-scale breakdown. By 8 o'clock, guests were leaving. Not in a trickle, in an exodus. The carefully planned timeline was in tatters. The expensive photographer had captured all the wrong moments. The cake sat uncut. The first dance never happened. Sophie found her mum in the corridor outside the reception hall, both of them crying. She should be here, Sophie sobbed. Emma should be here. I made such a huge mistake, Mum. These people, she gestured wildly back toward the reception. These are the people I chose over my own sister. Look at them. Look at what they've done. We need to reach her, Sophie's mum said, already pulling out her phone. We need to apologize. We need to make this right. They tried calling. Nothing. Straight to voicemail. Message after message, sent into the void. Where is she? Sophie's voice was rising toward hysteria. What if something's happened? What if she's hurt because of what we did to her? The panic spread through the family like wildfire. Within an hour, everyone was trying to reach me. The same people who'd stayed silent when I was uninvited were now desperately ringing, texting, sending increasingly frantic messages. But there was one tiny problem they hadn't accounted for. I was on a Greek island with my phone completely switched off, having the time of my life. The family group chat descended into absolute chaos. Mum, has anyone heard from Emma? She's not answering her phone. Aunt Linda, have you tried her work? Maybe someone there knows where she is. Cousin Mark. Wait, why are we panicking? She said she wasn't coming. She's probably just ignoring you lot. Sophie, she's not answering anyone. What if something's wrong? What if she's done something because of how we treated her? That last message sent a ripple of genuine fear through everyone. Because now, in the cold light of day after the wedding disaster, they were all starting to realize exactly how badly they'd handled this. How isolated I must have felt. How betrayed. And human minds have a terrible habit of jumping to the worst possible conclusions when guilt starts gnawing. Sophie was spiraling. She'd gone from breakdown to full panic attack, convinced that I'd hurt myself, that I was lying somewhere in my flat, that this was all her fault. James was completely baffled about why his new wife was hysterically sobbing about her sister instead of enjoying their wedding night, which sparked another argument between them. My mum tried to be the voice of reason, but even she was worried. She rang my work, got my out-of-office message. She rang my landlord, who confirmed I'd mentioned going away for a week. But where? And why wasn't I answering emergency calls? They started contacting my friends. Started with the ones they knew, then moved to the ones they found on social media. Most people either didn't respond or genuinely didn't know where I was. But then they reached Jess. Is Emma okay? Mum asked, her voice tight with stress. Please, we just need to know she's safe. Jess's response was measured, cool. She's perfectly safe. Where is she? Can you tell her to call us? It's urgent. Is it though? Jess interrupted. Is it actually urgent, or do you lot just feel guilty now that your perfect wedding imploded? The silence on Mum's end was deafening. She's taking time for herself, Jess continued, which, considering how you all treated her, is probably the healthiest thing she could be doing. She's safe. She's happy. And she specifically said she didn't want to be contacted. But, no buts. You made your choices. She's made hers. Deal with it. And she hung up. The family group chat exploded again. Some people were angry. How dare I make them worry like this? Others were defensive. They'd done nothing wrong. I was being overdramatic. But most were starting to see the horrible irony of the situation. The wedding that was supposed to bring the family together had ripped them completely apart. Old grievances surfaced. People who'd bitten their tongues during the uninviting were now voicing their opinions. Arguments broke out about who should have stood up for me, who should have said something, who was most to blame. The family was imploding in real time, and the catalyst for all of it was the one person who wasn't even there to witness it. James's family, the same people who'd insisted I be removed from the guest list, were now playing the victim card. They'd had no idea it would cause this much drama. They were just looking out for the harmony of the day. One of James's uncles had the audacity to suggest that if I were a better person, I'd have just sucked it up and stayed away quietly without making a fuss. That comment nearly split the family down the middle. The relatives who'd been on the fence suddenly had opinions. Loud ones. She didn't make a fuss. She left. She did exactly what you lot wanted. Aunt Linda wrote. Yeah, and now look what's happened. Someone else shot back. Sophie's mom was having her own crisis of conscience. She kept thinking about all the times she told me to be reasonable, to understand Sophie's position, to not make waves. She'd been so focused on keeping everyone happy that she'd completely failed to protect one of her own daughters. The guilt was crushing. She tried to ring me again, and again, and again. Each call went straight to voicemail. Each message disappeared into the void. By the second day after the wedding, even the people who'd initially thought I was overreacting were starting to worry. Not because they thought something bad had happened, but because they were beginning to understand the depth of my hurt. The fact that I'd completely cut myself off, that I was so done with all of them that I'd made myself unreachable, was more telling than any argument or confrontation could have been. I wasn't angry. I wasn't fighting. I was just gone, and that terrified them more than anything else could have. Meanwhile, I was on a beach in Greece, reading a book, completely oblivious to the chaos unfolding back home. My biggest concern that day was whether to have the grilled prawns or the moussaka for dinner. Life, as they say, is funny that way. The flight home felt surreal. 7 days in paradise, and now I was heading back to whatever mess waited for me. Part of me wanted to stay switched off forever, to just extend the trip indefinitely, and never deal with any of it. But real life doesn't work that way. I switched my phone on as the plane descended into Heathrow. It took about 30 seconds for the notifications to start flooding in. Then they didn't stop. Hundreds of them. The phone was actually vibrating continuously, like it was having a seizure. Messages, missed calls, voicemails, WhatsApps, emails. It was overwhelming. I scrolled through them, my heart rate climbing with each one. The early messages, from the wedding day itself, were angry, accusatory. How could you miss Sophie's wedding? This is so typical of you, making everything about yourself. You're being incredibly selfish. Then, about 6 hours after the wedding, the tone shifted dramatically. Emma, please call us back. We're really worried about you. Please just let us know you're okay. By day 3, they'd gone full panic mode. Emma, where are you? Please, please, please call me back. I need to know you're safe. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Please talk to me. That last one was from Sophie. There were 17 voice notes from her. I clicked on the first one. Her voice was wrecked from crying. I don't even know what to say. The wedding was a disaster. Everything fell apart, and all I could think about was how you should have been there. How I should have stood up for you. I made the worst mistake of my life, and I don't know how to fix it. Please call me. Please. I sat in my seat, staring out the window as London sprawled below us, and felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not vindication. Just this hollow, empty feeling where my relationship with my sister used to be. I didn't call anyone. Not from the airport. Not from a taxi. Not when I got home. I unpacked, showered, made myself a cup of tea, processed everything I'd read. The messages kept coming. Mum. Sophie. Even a few from extended family members who'd stayed silent during the uninviting and were now suddenly very concerned about my well-being. Finally, I responded. Just to Mum. One message. I'm home. I'm fine. I need a few days to process everything. I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk. The response was immediate. Relief. Gratitude. Desperation for me to meet them. To talk. To fix this. I made them wait 3 days. When I finally agreed to meet them, I chose the cafe. Neutral ground. Public enough that nobody could cause a scene, but quiet enough to have a real conversation. Sophie and Mum were already there when I arrived. Sophie looked awful. eyes puffy, face pale, like she hadn't slept properly in a week. Mum looked exhausted in a different way, the kind of tire that comes from carrying other people's guilt. Emma, Sophie started, but I held up a hand. Let me talk first. You both owe me that. They nodded, silent. I didn't go on holiday to punish you, I said, my voice level. I went because I needed to protect myself. You uninvited me from your wedding, Sophie. Not because I'd done anything wrong recently, not because we'd had some huge falling out, but because your new in-laws, people you barely knew, asked you to. And you did it. You chose them over me without a second thought. I know, Sophie tried to interrupt, but I kept going. Do you understand what that did to me? I spent months helping you plan this wedding. I was excited for you. I loved you. And you threw me away like I was nothing. Like our entire relationship was negotiable. The tears were streaming down Sophie's face now. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I let them manipulate me. I let them make me think it was the right thing to do for my marriage, and I... You didn't let them do anything, I said, and my voice was harder now. You made a choice. You're an adult. You chose to prioritize your relationship with them over your relationship with me. And actions have consequences. Mum spoke up, her voice quiet. We should have protected you. I should have stood up for you immediately instead of trying to keep the peace. I'm sorry, Emma. I failed you as a mother. I looked at both of them, saw the genuine remorse there, saw how much this had cost them, and I felt tired, just bone-deep tired of it all. I'm not interested in revenge or holding grudges, I said finally. But things can't just go back to normal. You broke my trust. Both of you. And trust has to be rebuilt, piece by piece. That's going to take time. It's going to take consistent action, not just words. It's going to require you both to actually show me that I matter. We will, Sophie said immediately. Whatever it takes. I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you. Maybe, I said. We'll see. The weeks after that confrontation were strange. The family dynamics had shifted in ways that couldn't be undone, like a bone that healed wrong and would never be quite the same again. I established boundaries. Clear, firm, non-negotiable boundaries. I stopped being the person who dropped everything when someone needed help. Stopped being the family mediator. Stopped prioritizing their peace over my own well-being. And you know what? Some people didn't like it. Cousin Mark called me difficult in the family group chat because I declined to help with his house move. An aunt I barely spoke to made passive-aggressive comments about how I was holding on to grudges. Some relatives who'd stayed silent during the uninviting were now resentful that I wouldn't just forgive and forget on their timeline. I left the family group chat. Just left. Muted, archive, done. If people wanted to contact me, they could do it directly. I wasn't interested in being part of the collective anymore, at least not until things felt healthier. Sophie's marriage was already showing cracks. James's family, it turned out, were controlling in ways that extended far beyond the wedding. They had opinions about where Sophie and James should live, how they should spend their money, when they should have children. The same people Sophie had prioritized over me were now making her life miserable. She'd call me sometimes, late at night, crying, asking for advice, apologizing again. And I'd help when I could, but I wasn't her emotional crutch anymore. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. I think I made a mistake, she said one night, 3 months after the wedding. Not just with you, with all of it. I don't know if I should have married him. That's something you need to work out. I told her. Maybe try counseling. Both individual and couples. But Sophie, I can't fix this for you. You have to figure out what you want and then fight for it. It was hard, maintaining those boundaries. Part of me wanted to fall back into old patterns, to be the person who solved everyone's problems. But I'd spend a week in Greece remembering who I was outside of my family role, and I wasn't willing to lose that again. I started therapy. Proper therapy, not just venting to friends. My therapist helped me see patterns I'd been blind to, how I'd been playing the role of family scapegoat for years, always the one who absorbed the blame, who made herself smaller so everyone else could feel bigger. You've been trained to believe that your worth is determined by your usefulness to others, she said during one session. And when you finally set a boundary, everyone treated it like a betrayal because you stopped playing your assigned role. That hit me like a truck. Because she was right. I reconnected with friends I'd been neglecting. spent more time on hobbies I'd pushed aside, started actually living my life instead of just existing in orbit around my family's needs. I even started planning another trip. Not to escape this time, but to celebrate. To remind myself that the world was bigger than family drama and wedding catastrophes and people who couldn't see my worth. Some family members made genuine efforts. My uncle sent me a long message apologizing for his silence during the wedding situation and asking if we could have lunch. Some cousins reached out individually, wanting to maintain relationships separate from the family politics. But others, they faded away, and I realized that was okay. Not every relationship needs to be preserved. Some things end, and that ending isn't a failure. It's just the natural conclusion of something that wasn't serving anyone anymore. 6 months out from the wedding, I was happier than I'd been in years. The irony wasn't lost on me. The worst thing my family had ever done to me had ended up being the best thing that ever happened. A year after the wedding, Sophie called me. "James and I are doing better," she said. "We've been in counseling. We set boundaries with his family. It's not perfect, but it's better." "I'm glad," I said, and I meant it. "We're having a small dinner for our anniversary. Just us, Mom, Dad, and a few close friends. Would you consider coming?" I paused. The old Emma would have said yes immediately, desperate to smooth things over, to prove I wasn't holding a grudge. But I wasn't that Emma anymore. "Where?" I asked. "We were thinking our flat, but—" "No," I interrupted gently. "If I come, it needs to be at a restaurant. Neutral ground. And we leave by 9. Clear start and end time." There was a pause. Then, "Okay. Yeah, that's fair." It was progress. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but progress. Sophie was learning to respect my boundaries instead of asking me to bend. The dinner was fine. Not magical. Not healed. But fine. Sophie and James seemed more grounded than they had at the wedding. Mom was careful, almost overly so, checking in with me multiple times to make sure I was comfortable. James's parents weren't there, which I appreciated. They'd send a card with a generic apology that felt more like legal cover than genuine remorse. But the most surprising moment came from James himself. He pulled me aside before dessert, his expression serious. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I let my family treat you appallingly, and I didn't stand up for you the way I should have. I was so focused on avoiding conflict with them that I didn't see the damage we were doing. That's on me. I'm sorry." I studied him for a moment. He looked sincere. And more importantly, Sophie was watching from the table with an expression that suggested she'd had no idea he was going to do this. "Thank you," I said. "That means something." It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation. But it was honest, and that mattered. As I drove home that night, windows down, music playing, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the holiday, the confrontation, the slow, painful rebuilding. I'd started a blog about 6 months ago, setting boundaries with toxic family members. Just somewhere to process my thoughts and share what I'd learned. It had gained a surprising following. Apparently, thousands of people had similar stories of being scapegoated, of being asked to shrink themselves for the comfort of others, of finally saying enough. I'd also started dating someone. Marcus. He came from a healthy family, the kind where people actually communicated, where boundaries were respected, where you didn't have to walk on eggshells. Being around them was like visiting another planet at first. I kept waiting for the drama, the manipulation, the guilt trips. They never came. Is this what normal families are like? I'd asked Marcus once, after a Sunday roast at his parents' house where everyone had actually enjoyed themselves. He'd laughed. "I mean, we have our issues. But yeah, basically, people just treat each other with respect." What a concept! My relationship with Sophie was different now. We texted occasionally, met for coffee once a month. But there was a distance that hadn't been there before, a protective buffer I'd built and wasn't ready to dismantle. Maybe I never would be. And that was okay. I'd learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up for you when things get hard. It's about who respects your boundaries instead of punishing you for having them. It's about who sees your worth even when you're not useful to them. Most importantly, I'd learned that my presence in anyone's life, family included, is a privilege, not a right. The wedding I was cut from had ended up being the catalyst for the most important relationship I'd ever rebuild, the one with myself. And you know what? I wouldn't change a single thing.